So hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Empire against the Dwarves led by Gurk Monstrit on the map Estalian Tomb. This time around I'm running a bit of a... I just wanted to try build out and see how it works. It's a very elite build and we'll definitely see how it goes. Right off the bat, this was supposed to be built around great Amber Wizards and a very heavy flying contingent. You can see it's the the quartet of Karl Franz coming in with the usual stuff: Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, Stand Your Ground, Reichland Runefang, and Golem Raz. Alongside a Jade Wizard who is coming in with Dwellers Below and Earthblood. An Amber Wizard with Transformation of Kadon, which allows me to summon a Manticore, and I'd want to use this to make my flying contingent even bigger. And then finally an Amber Wizard with Wiston's Wild Form. All three wizards do have Arcane Conduit, which means I should not have too much trouble with my magic supply. My front line is composed entirely of greatswords. These guys are really there to support the flying contingent, to push in while the flying contingent is being a nuisance, and kind of deal with my opponent's line. Out on the flanks, I have my only other unit, the Sterling's Revenge. These guys are a Regiment of Renown, Free Company Militia. They do quite a bit of DPS. They have armor piercing. They don't do magical damage like Silver Bullets, which is pretty good. They're very quick, so they should be able to outpace most Dwarven infantry, or actually all Dwarven infantry. That's not true, actually. Slayers are quicker, but everything else they should be able to outpace, and they should be able to just dish out a lot of hurt, especially if my opponent brings a lot of great weapons. My opponent, I'm going to throw things into slow-mo a little bit because I'm going to push in fairly quickly. My opponent decided to do a very wide, very cheap, but skirmish-heavy dwarf build. And this is skirmish-heavy by Dwarven standards, in my opinion. For his Lord, so I was actually definitely caught a bit by surprises by this. Definitely not the most pleasant of realizations. Jumping into the match where you've gone very elite-heavy and see your enemy has fielded a horde of shooting units. But you had to field the Lord, stripped down to almost nothing, Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, and Potion of Toughness. Interestingly enough, no Fiery Ring, which I feel is a bit standard for dwarves. You can see the cannon shots are already going out, aiming at my troops in the back there. My opponent's front line is fairly dirt cheap. It's all dwarf warriors, except the Grumbling Guard here in the center. So 5 units of dwarf warriors, Grumbling Guard to back him up with that vigor immunity. Out on the flanks, he has gone very cheap as well with miners, and he has 3 units of miners in the back, 2 on each flank. And these guys are just kind of there to zone away cavalry and help support his shooting contingent, which is very widely spread out to make it hard for me to shut them all down. Generally, the Dwarven boxes are very easy to shut down because you just drop a few units in the middle of them, and that disrupts all of their shooting. That's not going to be the case here. 4 units of Thunderers and 4 cannons means that my opponent can easily tear through my large flyers and even cause immense amounts of hurt to the great swords and more blobby kind of units. It's definitely a bit of a problem for me. You can see so definitely I'm trying to kind of push forward. I want to disrupt that cannon fire so they can't tear through my greatswords. You can see the cannons are already hitting the Amber Wizard despite most of the shots missing. The Dwarf cannons did get a buff in the recent patch, so now they have a true bonus against large, and they have a bonus to their accuracy, which they did not have prior. So I'm trying to kind of push in here. And just get on top of these guys. You can see the cannon fire though coming in hot and heavy, definitely dishing out a lot of hurt to my troops. Karl's already lost a good chunk of HP, so is this Amber Wizard. The leadership's dropping pretty quickly, and you can see the Thunderer fire already coming in. Fortunately, I've pushed up my Sterling's Revenge up, so they're shooting at these Dwarf Warriors, baiting these miners away, and now I'm finally getting to my opponent's backline, trying to just get on top of these cannons, shut them down and prevent them from shooting. So kind of going in all or nothing a little bit with my flying contingent. Unfortunately, that means I forget about my greatswords who are now sitting out here doing nothing while the flyers are kind of trying to do their best in the backline. You can see I summoned a Feral Manticore here and sent it after the Thunderers. Over here, Karl or the Amber Wizard is taking heavy fire from the cannons, and the Thunderers are shifting around to open fire on them, which is definitely a bit of a problem. Fortunately, none of these guys are immune to terror, and that is definitely a big boon for me in this sort of matchup, that I can count on my terror bombs to kind of rout my opponent off. Jade Wizard took some nasty beating, so he's forced to take off and kind of retreat. And now my flying contingent is just trying to take off. I'm leaving the Feral Manticore in there because it is degenerating, and I just want to keep it tying down my opponent as long as I can. Fortunately, this Amber Wizard is taking immense amounts of fire. My greatswords are finally pushing in. Unfortunately, I don't micro my Sterling's Revenge, and they are going to be engaged upon by these miners, which is not the greatest of engagements for them. I do believe these guys will actually win in the long term, but it is incredibly cost inefficient. Over here you can see the Feral Manticore is just getting shot up, though it has managed to take off 10 models on those Thunderers, or 9 I guess. And I have actually lost my Amber Wizard. He's shattered. I do dive into the flank of these dwarf warriors over here because my opponent has lost most of this right flank of shooters. They've mostly broken off. And now I'm able to plow in with the great swords. And I did manage to cast stand your ground and all that sort of stuff just so that I can disrupt and really beat up on these dwarf warriors out here on the end. Unfortunately, Carl is really beat up. The Jade Wizard is really beat up, though he's popping Arcane Conduit, and I won't be able to get another Arcane Conduit simply because the Arcane Conduit from the other Amber Wizard because he broke off. Now you can see I do get an Earthblood off, which heals up my troops a little bit. Nothing too fancy, but it is an overcast, so we'll get a little bit of healing done. And now the Jade Wizard does take off, and he is going to attempt to cast Dwellers Below on these Thunders. Dwellers Below has been greatly buffed, and does ridiculous amounts of damage now. Unfortunately, this Jade Wizard is completely routing, and he's actually going to, I do believe, just retreat off the field. My opponent is very astute and immediately notices Thunders being hit by the Dwellers Below and moves them out, so this is probably been one of the worst Dwellers Below I've landed in a long time. Despite taking off a lot of HP, it actually did very little kill count, or it killed very few models. My Jade Wizard over here is routing off. He's broken, but I do believe he'll simply leave the battlefield. Over here, the Amber Wizard and Carl are taking massive amounts of hurt trying to deal with these Thunderers. Fortunately, my opponent's artillery batteries have kind of been disrupted. Now they're having trouble. They're kind of having to reman them, crank them around, that sort of stuff. In the center here, I did bust through with some great swords. One unit of great swords is tying down all these miners and dwarf warriors over here on the flank, and the other unit has managed to flank around, get behind the grumbling guard. And though this unit of great swords has failed in the meantime, it does mean that I'm trying to getting into my opponent's backline. Carl over here does jump in on the cannons. One of the units of Thunders is getting hit by the great swords, while the grumbling guard is getting torn through by another unit of great swords. Amber Wizard doing a great job here chasing out the cannon crew. That Dwarven stubbornness, though, is definitely being a bit of a problem because my opponent is constantly able to bring units back online and to pepper me from all flanks. I have popped Wisdom's Wild Form on Carl just to give him a little more resistance because I'm a bit fearful here that I will lose him. The Great Swords over here have finally kind of mopped up this grumbling guard contingent. My opponent is realizing that and stops chasing the great swords. Over here on the far flank, you can see the Free Company militia, because I kept trying to retreat from the miners. It meant that they actually didn't stay in the fight, and they are actually losing to the miners. And I do believe there's in a little bit they're going to break, and my opponent will then pull his miners back. Great swords, though, are trading incredibly effectively. In spite of everything, actually, dwarf warriors and miners, they are kind of the cheap, dirt cheap units as far as dwarves are concerned. This combined trio is still more expensive than a single unit of great swords. So the great swords are trading very efficiently here and kind of beating up on some pretty significant units. Grumbling Guard over here has been forced to rout off, but great swords will not do too well against the Lord, who does pop stand your ground, and he will then, of course, be able to use his potion of toughness, which he still hasn't activated. Amber Wizard over here doing his best to force off the Thunders, who are terrified now, and Carl is kind of flying around trying to help out his great sword buddies over here. Fortunately, the cannon crews have been forced off, which means they won't be shooting at me. So I do dive into the back of these dwarf warriors and try to just rout them off. And I'm pushing them into the back here with these great swords, and I'm hoping to use them to kind of pursue these guys because they're very beat up and I won't get much out of them. In the meantime, my opponent is finally pulling his miners back. These guys got caught or chased off very, very far. Great swords have won on the right flank. Actually, the great swords have completely won that frontline engagement, and definitely that disruption paid off for me. Though obviously I did lose 2 wizards in the process. Over here, Carl is diving on top of these Thunders, trying to disrupt them. You can see Carl is very low on HP, and I don't have an Earthblood at this point. I don't have no Lore of Life at this point, so that's a bit of a problem. This cannon is shattered for good. Thunders are being pursued by the Amber Wizard, and Carl is just kind of flying around, trying to keep my opponent under constant pressure. This cannon is actually being remanned, which is a problem because I don't have anything to shut it down. Really, these great swords are fighting over there, fighting for dear life against these miners. These great swords over here doing their best against the Dwarf Lord. Another unit of great swords over here pursuing some dwarf warriors. Carl has gotten on top of these Thunders. One of the nice things about great swords is that while they are very slow as far as Empire is concerned, they are still faster or on par with dwarf speed for most dwarf units. And as you can see, these dwarf warriors these great swords are actually doing really badly against this lord. They're getting absolutely torn apart, but they are bogging him down and keeping him from helping his friends. This cannon is cranking around, which is definitely a bit of a problem because if it starts firing on my Amber Wizard, it could definitely shred it pretty badly. My opponent has gotten 2 more cannons back online and is trying to get the 3rd back and up and running. I'm trying to beat off these miners as quickly as I can. I see this cannon coming back online. I see this fire coming in on Carl. Carl is trying to push into the cannon as quickly as he can, and in the meantime, the Amber Wizard is going in on these cannons, moving to shut them down. Blows one up on the charge, and is now tearing through that crew very quickly. Carl takes a volley in the face, is down to 400 HP, which is very, very terrifying. But he's on top of these cannons, definitely dishing out a lot of hurt and kind of messing them up. These great swords are pushing in on this other cannon, trying to get in as quickly as they can, but that's not very quick because they are tired at this point. My Sterling's Revenge has actually returned, despite being routed off earlier, and they still do have 25 models, which means they can do a decent amount of range DPS. Because they didn't fire off too much ammunition. They only got 3 shots or 3 volleys off. These greatswords are still losing to the dwarf lord, but they're doing it very slowly, which is good for me. My greatswords get their charge off on these miners, and will absolutely tear through them. Greatswords are just very solid against dwarves. It's one of the few matchups where they'll do great. Carl over here is completely messed up. These guys did get a shot off on him, and he's down to 135 HP. He does dive in here, getting his revenge on these cannons that have been making his life miserable. Greatsword's beating him up. Ember Wizard is trying to push into these thunders. At this point, I'm in a lot of worry that if these guys get into position, they get one volley off, Carl dies, this is all over. I even popped standard ground, even as I went in against the cannon, which I would not normally do, but dwarf cannon or crews can be decent, so I was definitely a little worried about that. Now what I'm trying to do here is, this dwarf lord has actually taken a bit of damage eventually. He's kind of gotten beaten down, and I'm trying to get the Sterling's Revenge into position to shoot the dwarf lord up. He has at this point used his potion of toughness, I do believe. I don't want to use Carl on him, of course. In fact, I just want to keep Carl alive at this stage. I do dive in on these miners. With the support of the greatswords, they should be mopped up fairly quickly. Carl actually dives into opportunistically to get a few picks. I am trying to keep these greatswords away from the dwarf lord, but unfortunately the dwarf lord does pop foe seeker, and actually dwarf lords are a little quicker than normal dwarves. I think they go about 31 or 33, something like that. Headful of Thunders has regrouped out here on the outskirts and is definitely peppering down this Amber Wizard. Great Swords over here have been forced to re-engage on the Lord, though they won't last in that fight very long. They'll break very shortly, and that will let the Sterling's Revenge fire again. One of the problems is that the dwarves are very short, and so the Sterling's Revenge can't fire over their own troops into their lords. But I'm kind of hoping that at this point I'll be able to kind of mop up my opponent's force. Grumbling Guard pushed into these great swords, but they got slaughtered to a man, and the rest of my opponent's army is kind of just breaking and routing at this point, which only leaves my enemy's dwarf lord. But at this point I have so many great swords that there are a handful of units maybe still coming back, but at this point I'm fairly confident that I can just swamp this guy with great swords. And I still do have this Amber Wizard on reasonable HP. So very rough game for me. My build, you can see the two of my wizards got completely annihilated. The Amber Wizard and the Jade Wizard just got routed off almost immediately, and the Sterling's Revenge did very little. This was a much wider and much more shooting-oriented dwarf build than what I'm used to seeing, and I'm used to seeing a pretty shooting-oriented build, but usually there would be one or two less units of shooting, maybe 3 or 4 less. Like usually you'll see about 4 to 6 dwarven shooting units. 8 is a lot. And that is a lot to shut down. So you can see that was an absolute nightmare for me to try to deal with. I lost an Amber Wizard and lost that Jade Wizard almost immediately to him. Didn't get to capitalize much on Blood Below. Only got 1 Earthblood off. That transformation of Kadon did help a little bit in disrupting the early game, but was a lot of Winds of Magic down the drain, really. The bulk of the heavy lifting went down to the Great Swords, and you can see these guys did ridiculous amounts of damage. Obviously, some of the Amber Wizard and Carl still did a good job hunting the enemy's backline, but these Great Swords left uncontested in the front tore through those dwarf warriors. Even the Grumbling Guard, which is actually more expensive than greatswords, didn't trade that well with them. And they were supported by the dwarf lord, so this was very much a one-sided. The engagement in the center was very much one-sided. It was the lord and the Grumbling Guard against greatswords, one unit of greatswords. Despite that, the greatswords managed to tear through disproportionate amounts of miners and warriors, get in on the flank, get a pincer movement going, and kind of mop up the back line while Carl and the Amber Wizard were dying slowly enough to buy me time. So definitely a bit of an interesting matchup of cheapo depot dwarves against hyper elite Empire. I don't think this is that strong of a build against dwarves. In retrospect, the heavy it definitely came down to the wire. There's definitely builds that I think could be a little more reliable, but it was an interesting attempt or thing to try out. Definitely had a lot of fun running this many flyers again, and yeah, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. As usual, if you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War, any sort of that stuff like that, any recommendations, anything you'd like to request, any compositions or units you'd like to see demonstrated, because I do try to mix things up, but obviously I don't necessarily get to everything, and kind of sometimes forget about certain units because some of them are really unpopular. And I try to bounce around and try different stuff out. So definitely, if there's something you'd like to see, be sure to mention it. As usual, I do appreciate you guys for watching. And bye for now.